Good morning. I am actually back to one microphone. I was recording on two because I was having some problems with the audio, and it turns out it was my fault. Well, it was my fault because I badly designed something. I've got a little holder on the side of the gimbal that holds the audio recorder, and at some point in the future you'll see what I mean. There's like a quarter 20 camera mount for an accessory on the side of the gimbal and one underneath, and the one underneath has the monopod stroke boom pole attached to it, so I've got a longer reach, and the one on the side has a little selfie stick mount. If you've ever seen a really cheap selfie stick, they have this universal phone holder mount, and what I've used is some foam card to make a little grip thing, because the audio recorder isn't wide enough to be held securely by the phone mount. And when you put it in that with the extension to make it fit, to bulk it out a little bit, it presses on the volume buttons, and what that does is it turns down the volume of the voice recorder headphone jack. So the reason I wasn't getting any audio directly into the camera, which meant I had to sync up the recording on the audio volume, is because the side bit pressed down on the volume down button and essentially reduced the volume on the headphones to 0. So I wasn't getting any sound into the camera, which was the whole point of this rig, was to have good sound. Good sound is at least 50% of your video. So I now have the Purple Panda fully hooked up again as a microphone into the audio recorder. Then the headphone jack from the audio recorder goes into the camera using the GoPro adapter that you get free with a Purple Panda. Complicated, I know, but hopefully we're back to the sound quality that we were used to. I've got a new, I'm going to call it a dead lemming windshield. Usually they're called dead cats, and then if you've got a little microphone it's a dead hamster, and now if you've got a tiny lavalier mic with a fluffy windshield on it, I'm going to call it a dead lemming, because lemmings are tiny. Okay, so that done. It is day 5 of week 29. Woo! 5 videos, 5 days, getting back to form. Even though not much exercise has happened and my diet has gone to shit, I need to adjust to these new working hours, and I've got a bit of a cold. I can feel it. I haven't had a cold in ages. But yeah. So, a couple of things to talk about today. 3 things, in fact. So, I want to talk about last night's rain, which, given that I'm English, should not surprise you, but bear with me. And the second one is a very dark one about how I'm feeling about my government. And then I'll lighten it up with a review of a book. How's that? So yeah, 1, 2 and 3. So 1, last night it rained. And it rained all day yesterday, which shouldn't really surprise you. And it didn't rain that hard. It wasn't like punching holes in the roof rain, which I have seen before. I've seen it rain so bad at a veterinarian's that they had a little extension built on, and the rain had actually punched through the join between the main building and the extension. Like water was pouring through it. That was the heaviest rain I've ever seen. But if we take a look at our lucky river, thanks Clint from LGR, yeah, so it really rained, and it didn't seem like it was raining too hard here, but back on the other side of the Pennines, which divides Lancashire from Yorkshire, if you know your history, you know, it wasn't relevant, but the House of York and Lancaster were the main factions in the Wars of the Roses, which led to the Tudor period, with the White Rose and the White Rose of Yorkshire and the Red Rose of Lancashire, which was probably the inspiration for the Red and White Queen, you know, type thing. Anyway, in Alice in Wonderland. So it really rained in Yorkshire, and to the point where it flooded parts of Yorkshire so badly that people were marooned and trains were stopped. You know, like literally trains going across the Pennines were stopped. No trains going from Leeds or London to Liverpool. Liverpool was kind of cut off. Liverpool got some heavy rain off the Atlantic. So yeah. So global warming isn't a thing. Thank you, Mr. Trump. I'm glad it isn't a thing. I'm glad my microphone cable is untangled, but then leading into all sorts of problems. Let's put that up. Yeah. So got to watch the weather. Weird weather. You know, when it basically when it rains now, it's like disaster time. You know. And, you know, lots of crops are failing and stuff like that, and us booting people out of the UK, well, not booting people out of the UK from the EU, but, you know, being very, you know, half of us being very hostile towards European Union workers has meant that a whole harvest's worth of fruit and veg has been left to rot, thus damaging our food security. Thank you very much, small-minded bigots. And by the way, you're only being small-minded bigots to help out the wealthy. So you are stooges of the super wealthy. Yeah, Brexit, what a stupid idea. Why don't we ever listen to smart people? Why can't we have designated smart people where we just go, okay, we'll believe you. Like the fair witnesses in Stranger in a Strange Land. That's a book well worth reading. Get that as an audio book. Go listen to Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land. Don't listen to all of it, but they have a concept of the fair witness, where somebody, when they're wearing a robe, is honour bound to tell the truth, and the truth as they observe it, in as long as they have all the facts. So yeah, so it properly rained, and people were stuck in shopping centres. It was like the rain you see in places like Florida and hurricane areas, you know, where they get flooded and you've got people sitting on roofs. There were people that literally had to stay in a shopping mall overnight because of the floods. There were areas of the country where cars were swept away and stuff like that. We've got proper deep South America weather now. And there's a reason those areas weren't very heavily populated, like Florida and, you know, Texas and that. It's because those places are, without human intervention, bloody hard to live in. So yeah, how exciting is that? This is why we should really look at underground cities. You know, let's make the surface of the earth a giant nature reserve and live underground. That would be great. Also make warfare bloody difficult. You know, interscene wars against underground bunkers. You know, it's not going to happen. Also, you've got geothermal energy and shit like that. You know, this just makes me want to include a clip. I'm not going to, because I don't need the copyright strike. But the bit in Ghostbusters where Egon is talking to, is it Janine, the secretary, and she goes, oh, what are your hobbies? And he goes, I collect mould, spores and fungus. I believe they're the food of the future. I was like, they really are. We can make it look like anything. You know, look at corn. That's a spore. We could eat that. That'd be cool. We wouldn't have to raise animals, and then we'd have food security and all kinds of groovy stuff. Food and energy security. No, whatchamacallit, scarcity. Let's move into a post-scarcity economy because we have the technology. Do we do that? No. Why do we do that? Because wealthy people say no. Anyway, so that leads me, you know, weather bad, interesting stuff happening unless you're in the middle of it, and then it goes a little bit beyond interesting and becomes quite frightening. But that moves on to something I've been talking about in the Discord this morning. So I've come out and I've gone, yes, I will record it. Yeah, so it's a dark theme, but we need to possibly look at it. You know, when we look at genocide, you know, when anything bad occurs, you know, my recommendation to you is follow the money. You know, if you observe something bad, yeah, bad. If you observe something bad happening, so who benefits? You know, it's always some sort of religious claim or a moral claim or some shit like that. but it's always resources or money. You know, and in the modern world it's money, because the resources mean money. So your common denominator is an imaginary number. It's a bit like, you know, I mean, I would say it's like religious division, but religious division still leads to money. You know, money and power. You know, they're basically intertwined, because power is a thing that you give to people and you imagine, and so is money. Money is imaginary. It has to be. It doesn't really exist. It's not actually a resource. It's how, you know, a resource is how much money you can get and how you transmute that money into power. So, recently I've been observing people, and there is a disturbing, it's not a trend, I think it's always been there, but it seems to be moreover, or we're catching it slightly more often, in that there is a war being waged worldwide, it seems to me, against the poor. And by poor, I mean the 99% of people that have less stuff than you know, the 1% owning half the world and the 99% owning tiny scraps of it. You know, I'm privileged in that I get a lot of news and information and stuff like that in a way that some people in the world don't. And I find it disturbing that there is like an upper class, or shall we say a wealth-based hatred of poor people, even though it's the poor people that contribute to that wealth in a very major way. It's poor, you know, it's the resources and the time and labour of poor people that are transmuted into that obscene level of wealth that we're seeing in the world right now. Levels of wealth that go way, way beyond anything we've seen in history. And you notice the wealthy people never point that out. And the number of billionaires is growing exponentially, but there is like even a strata amongst billionaires. You know, you've got the mega billionaires that are worth more than $30 billion a pop. And I'm using dollars because it does seem to be the world currency in the way that pound sterling used to be. So yeah, so there's even a stratification of billionaires. How messed up is that? And I watched an interesting interview with Bernie Sanders where he said, you know, basically the idea of someone there being, you know, the kind of room in the economy where a billionaire can exist as obscene. You know, and these people hide all their money and stuff like that. And what we're seeing, particularly in Britain with Brexit, is the fallout from that, where, you know, governments are quite rightly asking, you know, how much tax did you pay last year, given that you're a billionaire? You know, and they're paying less of a percentage of their wealth than the people that clean their office buildings, which just isn't on. And the European reckoned that somewhere between a quarter and a third of all the tax bases of all the countries in Europe is being hidden. Oop, I have to stop this. Yeah. That is a squirrel getting a surprise visit from a red-tailed buzzard, I think, and having a fairly terrible time of it. Okay, so that was a couple of people I didn't want to film, but they were taking their, I think, a red-tailed buzzard for a wander. I can see the Jessies on it. I don't know whether it's on camera, but I did try and capture it for you. I can't see on the little screen here. It's another reason I need my HDMI monitor, although I have no idea how I'm going to really connect it. I'm going to give it a go. So yeah, you know. So yes, the wealthy people of the world are trying to screw us, and they don't care how much they destroy the environment doing it. And you can literally trace it back to super wealthy people, which is very depressing. So yes, So that leads into one of the things I was looking up this morning, is that in the last 10 years of, in inverted commas, austerity, which is provably not a way you rebuild an economy after a crash, since the 2009 housing equity crash and all the sort of terrible things that went along with that, the UK has been in a state of, in inverted commas, austerity, and seemed to have slowed down wealthy people a jot. But yeah, so the Office of National Statistics reckons that 130,000 excess deaths occurred as a result of austerity and the government cutting benefits and services. Now my question is this: 130,000 is well beyond the UN's definition, if you know, of genocide. You know, it's the Muslim murders in, I think, Serbia of 7,000 Muslim men counts as genocide. So if you expanded the definition, which doesn't exist in the UN definition of genocide, but it has, the UN has been criticised for not including wealth disparity, people of different levels of income, when they're killed off as genocide. And why would they? You know, they're politicians too. You can't like start listing all the people that are dead because they're poor, because genocide would be occurring all over the place, and everybody in every government nearly. I think the Germans are all right, the Icelanders are okay, some of the Scandinavian countries, but pretty much everybody else has been killing poor people. So if 7,000 people, if they're of a particular religious affiliation, counts as genocide. You know, you're taking people out because of who they are. But 130,000 people, you know, as in the poor, all the poor people that have died in the last 10 years as a result of being poor, because despite the fact that we get charged around 30% tax, that money's not for us. No. That money's to be siphoned off to rich industrialists and supporters of whichever party happens to be in power. So 130,000 people isn't genocide. No. So, you know, but as far as I'm concerned, that's genocide. You know, that's just in the UK. Just in a tiny island, the government's managed to kill 130,000 people by misappropriating money. Nice, thanks government. You know, that's just us. I'm using that figure to sort of try and bring it home to you, because it seems that 1 million people in Iraq during the Iraq War isn't genocide. No, it's collateral damage. You know, 130,000 people in the UK, it's collateral damage. I mean, imagine 1 million people. That's like what would happen if you took a good-sized city off the face of the earth. You know, you can usually only kill that many people, 1 million people, with like nuclear weapons. It takes a while. You know, you've got to really work at it to kill 1 million people. And yeah, I lay that squarely at the door of people wanting to take the resources or to take away the threat of the removal of that resources. We're prepared to do that as a species. It's pretty depressing. Whereas if you ask the average person, as in one of the 99% on planet Earth, saying is it okay to kill 1 million people, they'll probably say no, because it's not. You know, men, women and children no longer here because of a government's determination to spend money on what it wants to spend money on, and some of those people are getting high-paying, ridiculously high-paying jobs. People who are earning more than a year's pay for everybody else to give a speech because they were president, or they were prime minister, or they were an industrialist. Not okay. Not a fair division of labour. You know, that chap, that German chap, Marx, might have wrote a book about that. And then as soon as he published it, the world spent a good 100 years or so, nearly 150 years, talking about how communism was bad. And it's just, well, we've never really seen communism. We've never really seen a socialist republic that existed for the people, by the people, for the people, of the people. Doesn't seem to have panned out all that well. Seems to be people is a thing that these, you know, these super special humans that don't, you know, they don't have any special skills. They don't. Donald Trump doesn't have any special skills. Boris Johnson doesn't have any special skills. The people in charge aren't special. They don't have fucking superpowers. They have luck. On this planet, there are wealthy vaginas and there are poor vaginas. And if you fall out of a poor vagina, the chances are you're going to have a lot of money. And that's all there is to it. If you had to start off, you know, with this, you know, we don't start off equal. All men are not created equal. All men and women, you know, and people that aren't men and women, because intersex is a thing. That's 1.7% of everybody on Earth. That's a fairly large proportion. That's, you know, 250 million people. 250 million people on Earth are intersex. So that's, you know, there is a third gender. But that's a very wide definition. So, you know, we are not all created equal. We do, you know, but you can fall out of the right vagina. And then you can be sent to an educational establishment that will tell you that you are special and destined to run the fucking planet. That's what happens. Some people are self-made, but unfortunately those people, you know, I'm not entirely sure. You know, those people generally come from privileged backgrounds. If nothing else, Bill Gates is from a privileged background. Mark Zuckerberg is from a privileged background. You know, Jeff Bezos is from a privileged background. There are very few people that started off poor that became billionaires. It just doesn't really happen all that often. You know, you have to come from a place of privilege. I mean, arguably, all those people, everybody that's ever made money is from the 1%. Because the 1%'s educational system says you have every right to take advantage of everybody else. There are very few rich, poor people that started off from a working class background, actually working class. You know, the lowest level of working class person, you know, has generally come from a middle class background. And then they seem to have a hatred. You know, even those people that come from a working class background that end up being wealthy tend to despise the people that were around them when they were younger. So it's kind of like, if you manage to be wealthy and working class, generally speaking, you despise the poor. There are exceptions. There are always exceptions to the rule, but those people get insulated from where they've come from extremely quickly and seem to forget the lucky break. You know, the founders of Apple. I would say Steve Jobs probably started off as working class. Although, you know, there's a level of white man born in a comfortable suburb in America, sort of like level of privilege there. You know, Steve Wozniak, working class, but there again, he bailed on Apple as soon as it stopped being about, you know, largely computers being in the hands of the poor. I've got to wander back. I want to continue this. And I do, and I don't want to film people without their permission. I don't want to ask them for their permission because it's tedious. And quite rightly so. I wouldn't give permission for people to randomly film me, probably. So yeah. So there's that. So it does seem to be a global genocide attempt. There are too many poor people, you know, and there wouldn't be quite so many poor people if we had things like education, birth control, empowerment of women, or over, you know, to at least empower them over their reproductive cycle. You know, we're not empowered. Yet study after study after study shows that, you know, empowering people is probably the cheapest way to bring people out of poverty. But as a famous billionaire once said, let them be poor, because we will keep the secrets of making money to ourselves and we will lie to the poor people. We will pretend that the ones that do survive will be eminently rich. So as in order to protect our tax base, you know, and keep our tax rates low so we can become even richer and we can oppress them even more. And like I say, there are exceptions. There are decent people out there that are trying to make it possible for other people to lift themselves out of poverty. And you know, poverty is the cause of terrorism. Poverty is the cause of child death and women in labour dying and all that kind of shit. You know, things that affect us all. You know, the chances of you getting to 5 years old has increased around the world amazingly. The chances of miscarriage have dropped. Miscarriages still occur, and they occur disproportionately, you know, to working class women, as does, you know, death in childbirth, as has always been the case throughout history. And those things are improving slowly, but you know, medical care should be free. You know, it does not benefit anyone for children to die of preventable diseases. It does not benefit anyone to, you know, for women to die in childbirth. It's obscene and it's stoppable, and it's pretty cheap to stop that. But you've got other people who want to be in power for, you know, for their own reasons. Everybody wants power and money. And one of the other ways you can get power and money is to be head of a church, or at least in the top echelons of that church. And in order to have power and money, you need your money base to be secure. So you can't have them using can't have poor people using contraception, because poor people give to charities and churches all the time, far more proportionally than wealthy people do. So yeah, people with money want poor people to die. And that's just the way it is, and that's the way it's been for a long, long time. You know, because they hate us. They want us so busy trying to earn a living and survive that we're not going to say, hey, why do all these wealthy people have, you know, stupid multiples of wealth more than I do? Because they don't seem to do a whole lot. They don't seem to contribute a great deal. So yeah. I mean, you know, and even on the, you know, just the taxation thing is well beyond fair. You know, getting a wealthy person to pay the same percentage of tax as a working class person is nigh on impossible. You know, that decision led to Brexit. The EU announces that it's going to try and make companies and individuals pay tax in the countries where they made the profit. And suddenly the EU's being broken up by powerful and wealthy forces. Shit, it looks like a war. You know, and I know I'm using combative language, but it is combat. You know, it's where we've got to stop being, you know, airheaded hippies. I go, well, peace and love, people. Peace and love totally works out for the super wealthy. Peace and love is never going to prevent the super wealthy. You know, you can use love to fight it, in that you've got to love the people that are around you. You've got to look at those people and go, oh. I think I've just run out the battery on the gimbal. So it looks like the gimbal's about to fade. So I'm going to leave it there. You know, think about it. Give it some thought. You know, it's kind of a thing. You know, war's being waged. Anyway, so part 3 is this. Yeah, this is the Pocket Ref Guide by Thomas J. Glover, produced by Spiroflow Power Handling Solutions. Now the weird thing is, I've been looking for a pocket pairs cyclopedia for a while, and this is nearly it. I mean, if you're a materials nerd, then you know, oh, there it goes. So I'm going to have to hold the camera. No gimbal. I didn't charge the gimbal. Let me just sort that out. Let me just put this here. So we're going to end it as a semi-stabilized camera. So this little book, and it actually does fit in a shirt pocket, and it's about the same size as a Collins Gem. I got this after, I think, Digital Whiskey or Iron Angels, one of the two pointed it out to me and said there's this thing. So if you are an engineer, you probably already own this. But, you know, in the prepper library, I would say this earns a place. It has quite a lot of stuff, including first aid, materials, formulas, physics, workings out of the number of joists, of what wood you need in order to build a house. It's kind of like the handyman's pocket Bible. And it's a very interesting thing, and I'm having a lot of trouble stabilizing this camera. And you can get this cheap second-hand. It hasn't been updated in a few years, and it is very American-centric. It really is. So I'm going to have to hold this. It is extremely American-centric. It's got lots of American zip codes, but it also has weird things like crane and hoist hand signals, semaphore, Morse code, ASCII codes, voltage drops over wire, all that sort of thing, various connectors, information about how electricity works, all sorts of weird planetary data. So it's about as close to a Pears Cyclopedia as you're likely to get that will fit in your pocket, and I do need to cover this in sticky back plastic to make it last longer. But yeah, it's pretty cheap. I mean, I think it's about $10 new, or 10 quid new, wherever you happen to be in the USA or in the world. But it's got lots of geometry, knots and all kinds of stuff. So if you already have Food for Free, if you already have the Self-Sufficiency Bible, if you already have the SAS Survival Guide and the Guide to Mushrooms, which I would say probably your big 4 or 5 books, the next book you should possibly get, even if it doesn't end up being a reference to you, but you have to build something, is probably, you know, the Pocket Ref. And I like it. I mean, I like it because it's compact. Compactness, this is like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. First, it is slightly cheaper. And second, it has the words "Don't Panic" printed on the cover in big friendly letters. This literally has quite a lot of stuff in it. The first aid stuff and the water pollution stuff, and strand wire, voltage drops over wire, formulas for working out geometry and stuff like that. There's quite a lot of stuff in there that it's worth having. There's quite a lot of human science in this book. So if you want to preserve a book, get hold of a copy. I got mine for less than £5 sterling delivered. So I wanted to point that out to you, and what a great call. I've never seen it before. There are second-hand book places. We need to basically get a data pack for Urban Agoge and a book list for Urban Agoge, and definitely have a read of The Time Machine. H.G. Wells basically predicted the class war thing, hundreds of years before what we're witnessing now. He was a bit of a free thinker. He was definitely polyamorous, and he hated the middle class. So yeah, I mean, the Morlocks are the working class. It's not just the people on the surface and the people underground. It's something that wasn't in any of the movies. In none of the movies did they say, and the working class people turned into monsters because we kept them underground as a source of labour so we could live our idyllic lifestyle on the surface. I mean, he pretty much says that in the book. So it's on YouTube as an audio book. Go get it. I mean, The Time Machine, H.G. Wells, unabridged. Check it out, because it's an eye-opener. Because I thought I'd, absorb the story of The Time Machine, but clearly no. So thank you to Harlequin for pointing that out. I didn't know shit about this book. And it only makes Project Morlock a more viable title for the next project that I'm going to do on YouTube. I've only got time for doing one ongoing project, and the reason I'm going to be starting anew on a different thing, and hopefully you'll join me, I will put up the first couple of weeks of Project Morlock on Urban Agoge, and really, I need to start a new channel because I want to hit those analytics. I want basically a Black Panthers for the 99%. And I'm going to be working very hard on scripting that and making it a much more polished product. Urban Agoge started out as a project for me and for me and Harlequin to basically look at fun stuff and share like a video diary of getting more competent and becoming, as they say in Australia, be more deadly. Which, if you live in in a country with loads of deadly animals, yes, be more deadly, cobber. So that was what Urban Agoge originally started out as. We've managed to get like 32, we lost a subscriber, I don't know how, subscribers, and I don't know who it is because you can't list your subscribers. I can't see a list of my subscribers. If you know how to list your subscribers by online name, I could probably work out, who's missing. But if somebody doesn't want to subscribe to it, then that's fair. It's free choice and shit. So yeah, so Project Morlock is going to start, and I'm going to try and make it more polished. I've got more resources now, so I want to start producing stuff. I want to, I'm going to go the whole capitalist route to make capitalism more obvious. I don't have a gimbal anymore, so I'm going to have to end it here. So yeah, Project Morlock is going to definitely become a thing. Maybe even a sigil. I want a smiley face, but with like pointy teeth and an angry expression, like a smiley face to strike fear into the 1%. because they have every right to be frightened of us, because what is happening now in the world is that the 1% are going, no. And that's what we need to do. And on that thought, thanks for watching. Do take care. Speak to you soon. Probably tomorrow.